Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Rebecca Alyward. Not gonna lie, this one got me right in the feels. So let's go. Sin and Tonic! Complete disclosure and full transparency. I am having a really difficult week. The reason I have chosen this mug is because I am a freaking superhero and I deserve it. Okay. Oh, give me strength. I am not only Sophie Sin and Tonic, but also an autism mama. So sometimes you need gin in a freaking superhero mug. If you know, you know. Without further ado, let's start our story. Our story begins with Rebecca Alyward. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think I am. She was born on the 28th of February in 1995, and she was born and raised in Bridgend in Wales. South Wales. Wales. Lovely accent, the Welsh accent. Wales. I can't do it very well, but it is really nice. Rebecca was the eldest of 3 siblings, and I'd like to really paint this picture here, if I can. I watched some amazing footage of Rebecca's mum, Sonia, and she portrayed Rebecca beautifully. So I'm going to try to. So Rebecca had a younger sister and a younger brother, and they were close. Justin and Jessica and Rebecca, she was the eldest. Rebecca was incredibly warm, incredibly kind, sensitive soul. So if there was any sort of bullying going on at school, it really got to her. This is what her mum said. She would really feel the pain of that person that was going through a tough time. She was also incredibly smart. She had the brains. She was studious. She was like an A student. She was doing very, very well at school. She kept her head down, she got on with her work, and she was just doing incredibly well. People at school really liked Rebecca. She was kind, she was loving, caring, and like I said, she was incredibly close with her brother and her sister and her mum as well. So they had a really tight-knit family. They spent a lot of time together. They enjoyed spending time together. They had a laugh together. It was all lovely. In secondary school, Rebecca met somebody called Joshua Davies, and her mum would say that when they first were in class together, it wasn't fireworks and all of this, that and the rest of it. She knew of him, but they weren't close. As time went on, they became closer, they became friends, and Joshua would start to be in Rebecca's life more. He was charming, he was good looking, he was tall, blonde. He was also incredibly smart. So he was super intelligent, and he also did very well at school. He was another A student. So he would sit and he would crack on with his work. He would sit with the other quiet boys in the class, his teacher would say, and so did Rebecca. So they were very, very similar in their approach to their learning at school. They wanted to get on and they wanted to do well. Joshua was described as nice. He was also described as polite, and most adults that knew him, there was nothing unusual about him. He was just nice. People would even describe him as caring as well. There was another side to Joshua, a side that probably was more seen by his peers at school than adults in his life, teachers and mums and dads. He liked to be in control. And he had a big ego. He was going to be the best at everything. Sometimes those traits go hand in hand with successful people, successful students. They think a lot of themselves, they have a lot of self-confidence. Sometimes not at all. But in Joshua's case, this is exactly what happened. He had a big ego, and he knew that he was good. He was popular, he had lots of friends. He was also talked about as a leader, so the leader of his friendship group, and this ties in with his controlling nature. So he wanted to control things, he wanted to be in charge, he had a big ego, but for the most part he was popular, he was well liked, he was caring, and he was nice and polite. Narcissistic behaviour here, and he really did like the spotlight on him. He liked to be the centre of attention. What can I say? Although that is so not true about me. This is fine. but I don't want to be in the middle of a party with people staring at me. Joshua also had an incredibly, I would say, unusual hobby, or a couple. He collected antique hunting knives, bit out there, isn't it? And guns and things like that. So he collected these things. Just an unusual thing for a teenage boy to collect. Or is it? I don't know. I'm going to say yeah. Whatever floats your boat. There was an incident with one of these hunting knives. Rebecca and Joshua, like I say, they became close, and as is usual with teenagers and their friendship groups, they would spend a lot of time together outside of school. This was the case here. I also mentioned that Rebecca was close with her sister and her brother, and on one occasion, Rebecca and her sister Jessica, they went to Joshua's house, and he came out of his room with one of his hunting knives, antique hunting knife, and he kind of like threatened Jessica with it. Sounds like it was all a bit uncomfortable and weird. Frontal lobe not developed properly. Teenagers do some weird things, but yeah, it seems like it was a moment like that, just a bit uncomfortable, a bit awkward. Jessica didn't like it, she wasn't happy, and just one of those things. It was meant to be in jest, and because of that, it kind of just got like brushed under the carpet and they didn't speak about it again. Another kind of unusual hobby, I'm going to say, I think, yeah, is that Joshua was very talented at art, and he would draw and write books about kind of really dark stuff, like killing mainly. Lots of monsters, the devil, knives, guns, gore, blood. Just dark, but talented. So the drawings were very good. And Rebecca would even show some of these drawings to her mum because she was so proud of Joshua's talent. So she was like, wow, look what he can do. But yeah, her mum noticed that these drawings and things were dark. In October 2009, Rebecca and Joshua would get together. This is when they officially became boyfriend and girlfriend, and Rebecca was very, very happy. Joshua was her first boyfriend. Joshua would also integrate himself nicely into the family, so he got on very, very well with Sonia, Rebecca's mum, and the siblings, and he would spend a lot of time at Rebecca's house, so they did get close. Chillingly, Joshua would say things to Sonia, Rebecca's mum, like, don't worry, she'll always be safe with me. I will always look after her. And then, in the last week of January in 2010, things took a very sinister turn. In my mind, when I researched this case, I could not understand what went on here. The mind boggles. While I was researching this case, often I was, why? Challenged me. Last weekend of January, Joshua stayed the whole weekend at Rebecca's house with her family, and they had a wonderful time. It would seem. They'd been together a few months, they were happy, they got on, everything was fine, they were having a really, really lovely time together, and that weekend was no different. In fact, it was amazing. So much so that when his mum picked him up the next day, Joshua would say to Sonia, this was the best weekend of my life. You know, so he had a really good time. There's pictures as well. I'll share some pictures. Like, she painted his fingernails, Rebecca, and they were on the computer together and they were just having a laugh. And in the photographs, it looks genuine. It looks like they're both really having a nice time together. Hours later, not long, literally a few hours later, Joshua texts Rebecca to break up with her. What? It just feels... I had questions. I had lots of questions while I was researching. Why? Why was my question all the time. Why? This was just incredibly weird. Just out of the blue, what the hell, really happy. Everyone at school said they were just genuinely really happy together. This was like perfect. Even teachers would say, oh, Rebecca, yeah, that makes sense. That's got that, and that they were getting on like a house on fire. It just made no sense. Rebecca's mum, Sonia, she was saying, has he got somebody else? Has he met another girlfriend? They were very young. These things happen, and Rebecca had no idea. All she knew was that he had broken up with her, and she was heartbroken. Even worse is that after this, Joshua turned into a nasty piece of work. He was awful to Rebecca, and there's no other way to describe it than just a big fat bully. He was just being so unkind to her. He was trying to turn everyone in school that he knew against Rebecca. He had a massive vendetta against her. Why? Again, why? He made up some horrible rumours. He said that she was pregnant, and he even spoke to Rebecca and said to Rebecca, you will tell everyone that you are pregnant. Yeah, like wanted her to lie for him. And just a nasty, nasty piece of work at this point. What is going on now? How has he flipped? Like, what's happened? He really, really tore her down. If there were any new people that came to the school, any new students, he would tell them how awful she was. He would make up lies about her. He was just really nasty. I'm sorry, I haven't got a cold, but I think I might have hay fever again. Deuce. Pride of lead. This went on for a long time, his very angry, bullying nature towards Rebecca, and even his friends, they got to the point where they were like, we're going to leave school soon, so just pack it in, leave it alone. Like, she'll be out of your hair, she'll be out of your life when we leave here. But, like, no one really knew what had happened, why he was so pissed off, but it got a bit much. I think everyone was just like, chill out, mate, and like, just forget about it. Like, just why do you care? Why? Joshua said to his friends that the mere thought of her existence made him feel sick. He couldn't even stand the thought that she existed in the world with him. What happened? There is no mention anywhere that they argued, that anything went down, that she would have done anything that would have warranted this level of anger. I did look. There was a source that said something about the fact that he didn't want to use condoms when they had sex or something like that, but I take that with a pinch of salt, and I don't think that is enough. He's like really angry, isn't he? It's like, what? Later on, a forensic psychologist would say that this had all been orchestrated, and that he enjoyed the fact that he was able to hurt her so much. So was their whole relationship from the very beginning a big sort of ploy to get her comfortable, close, happy, in love, and then tear her down? Perhaps, we don't know. He hasn't said why, but it could be. And that's just sick, isn't it? Literally sick. It's at this point that Rebecca, horribly, this just is so weird and tragic, she started saying to her friends that she really felt like he might kill her. On the other side of the coin, Joshua is in fact planning her demise. So she wasn't far off. Poor thing. So would begin his obsession with planning Rebecca's murder. He would talk to friends all the time, and this went on for a while, about how he would get rid of Rebecca, how he would kill her. And he was quite detailed. So even though his friends, and don't forget they are quite young teenagers, 15, 16, his friends thought it was hot air. They thought he's very angry for some reason. They weren't sure why. And they thought that he was just pissed with the world, and that this was all just in his mind, like not a real threat. On the inside, this was the beginning of Joshua having huge, obsessive thoughts about killing Rebecca. He planned 2 ways in particular, and he planned them quite meticulously, and that just shows how dangerous he really was. This wasn't airy-fairy, like, oh, I'm gonna kill her and like just ramblings on. He really had thought this through. One of the ways was to take her to a location with a bridge and push her into the river. I don't think she could swim, and then in the guise of helping her, jump in but actually make sure that she had drowned. Piece of shit. Or another option that he had was to poison Rebecca. And he actually had thought through that process, what he would use, what he would mix it with, that he'd poison her Ribena, and he really had thought through that process. More on that later. Josh and his friends had a tradition that every Saturday they would meet up and go for a breakfast together at a local cafe, and they did this every Saturday. And it was at one of these morning breakfasts on Saturday that a friend made a really sick bet with Joshua. His friend would say that he was so fed up of hearing all this crap, like all this, yeah. He was just like, well, put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to do it, and if you do it, I'll get you a free breakfast. Well, not a free breakfast. He was like, I'll buy your breakfast. This became a sick running joke between the friendship group. Well, he's not going to do it. If he does it, he's got a breakfast in it for him. But they thought this was all quite jovial. Stupid, and crass, but they thought it was all a joke. Really, underneath all of these layers is a freaking monster just waiting to bubble out. After a few months, things seemed to calm down and fizzle out a little bit, and his friends must have been like, good, this is boring. Around this time, Rebecca became really unwell. She was very sick and she ended up in hospital, and they didn't know what was wrong with her. If you were like me, you will be thinking, what the fuck? Because I just straight away thought poison. Fuck, I did it. But they couldn't find anything wrong with her. And I'm thinking I should research this. But if he had used poison, would that not show up in her blood work? I don't know. I know there's some things that don't. I'm going to Google that. I have no reception. I shall Google it later, put it in the description box for your perusal. Anyhow, she was blacking out, vom, the lot, really poorly enough to be in hospital. No tests could determine what was wrong, so I'm guessing it wasn't poison. But I did think that straight away, like, oh my gosh. After the summer holidays, Rebecca was better. Miraculously, no one knew what was wrong, but she got better. And they went back to school. And when they went back to school, Rebecca had a new boyfriend. And this did not sit well with Joshua. Not at all. All of a sudden, Joshua, who had massively hated Rebecca previously to the summer holidays, all of this campaign, this bullying, this hurtful, horrible nastiness that he'd exhibited, that just vanished into thin air, and he was jealous. People assumed he was jealous. Classmates would say he just wanted Rebecca back, and he was not happy with the new boyfriend's situation. It was no secret that Rebecca had strong feelings for Joshua still. She really, really loved the guy. Even though he had been such a douche, she really, really loved Joshua. On Friday, the 22nd of October, Josh and Rebecca would have a conversation on the internet, little chit chat, and this conversation basically led Rebecca to believe that Joshua wanted to get back with her, and she was so excited, happy, so, just like she couldn't believe it. She was sat with her mum, Sonia, and she was showing her these messages, and it really did seem like he was going to get back together with her. So they arranged to meet the following day on the Saturday. They both noticed when they were sitting there looking at the messages that Josh had changed his profile picture on Facebook, and this was not unusual for him to do when something big was going to change in his life. So if he was going to do something exciting, like let's say go to a concert, he would put the band as his profile picture or a picture of a concert, something like that. I've made that up, but something like that, just so you can see what I mean. He was quite an artistic soul, so this was something that he did often if something was going on or if he was going to make a big life decision. They assumed that he was going to get back with Rebecca the following day. Therefore, this was a big life decision and he had changed his profile picture. Makes sense. But it didn't make sense because the picture that he posted wasn't anything to do with Rebecca. It was a picture of a local woodland. On the one hand, Rebecca was incredibly excited that she was going to meet him the next day and that he wanted to get back together, so she thought. But on the other hand, she was a bit confused about this profile picture because she was like, I can't see how that ties in with me. Rebecca went and brought herself a whole new outfit for the occasion. And the following day, on Saturday, the 23rd of October, she set out to meet Joshua. She had been so excited at home getting ready that morning. Her mum said that she was dancing around her room, full of excitement, full of happiness. It makes me want to cry. At the same freaking time, Josh is at his usual Saturday morning breakfast with the lads. And as he gets up to leave, he calmly says to his friends, the time has come. So contrasting. Rebecca was dropped off at the train station at 1 p.m. This is where Rebecca and Joshua had agreed to meet. However, Joshua was not there. She got a text 10 minutes later from Joshua to say, change of plans, I can't meet you at the train station, come and meet me at the park. So off she goes. She walks to the park. When she's at the park, she has a phone call with her mum, Sonia. Sonia is not happy at all that her daughter is now on her own in the park. She doesn't like it. She's like, I'm not happy about this whatsoever. While she's on the phone, Rebecca gets another text message from Joshua to say, actually, change your plan again. Come and meet me in town. So Rebecca's mum is a bit peeved and she's like, well, do you know, I'm going to stay on the phone with you while you walk to town. And this, I know, like, it's weird, isn't it? But you know, when like small details in cases like have an impact, I don't know why, but this just did. The thought that her mum is doing something, it's going to make me cry, is so, what's the word? Like, that is just so, like, it's your motherly instinct, isn't it? She's just protecting her daughter. She's like, I'm going to stay on the phone with you while you walk from the park to the town. I don't like this. And that breaks my soul, literally breaks my soul because of what happens. She just was like, you know, just trying to protect her kid, trying to make sure that she was okay. She had worry, little did she know. I mean, whoa. Just gets me. It really gets me that. Stayed on the phone with her. It's like, oh my God. Breaks my soul. Quite soon, Rebecca gets to town. She gets to the town and Sonia's still on the phone with her. You know, can you see him? Can you see Joshua? Where is he? And then Rebecca says, I see him. I think this is Josh coming down the hill towards me. I think it's him. And her mum stays on the phone. She's not content with that. She's like, again, this gets me. She's like, you know, are you sure it's him? I want to know for sure that it's him. And then eventually, after asking her 3, 4, 5 times, Rebecca's like, it's him. He's standing right in front of me, Mum. It's him. It's Josh. And there's a little moment of red flag for Sonia because she said whenever Joshua was with Rebecca, if she was on the phone to her mum, he would say, hi, Sonia, or hi, Son. He might even take the phone and have a chat with her. You're right, you know. And there was silence. It was just nothing. He didn't say a word. There was no indication that anyone was with Rebecca. But she trusted her daughter and she said, he's standing right in front of me. Love you. See you later. And that was the last time Sonia ever spoke to her daughter. Later on that evening, this is when the real alarm bells are ringing. Sonia gets a phone call from her sister, Rebecca's aunt, and she says, I can't get hold of Rebecca. I'm trying to ring her. I don't know what about. I couldn't find that in my research, but her auntie was trying to ring her and talk to her, and she just could not get through. She said her phone was off, or, it was going to voicemail. This was like, what? Because Sonia said she knew that Rebecca had a full battery on her phone. She was very careful about things like that, and she just couldn't understand why Rebecca's phone would be off or what. She was like, it wouldn't have run out of battery. She just couldn't understand it, and she was worried. She didn't like it. So they started to continuously ring Rebecca's phone, and sometimes it would ring and ring and ring and ring, and sometimes it would go directly to voicemail. So they knew it hadn't run out of battery. That was then off the cards. So what was going on? This was also unlike Rebecca. Why was she not answering her phone? She wouldn't do that, not at all, especially with her auntie, but also with her mum. Sonia felt uncomfortable. She felt like she didn't like this at all. She felt something was off. So her and her sister, they went out in the car and walking around, and they went to the train station, they went to the park, and they went to the town where all the places that Rebecca had been that day. And they just went to look. I mean, what else can you do? It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? Like, it must be incredibly worrying. Just, where are they? When it started to get dark, this is when Sonia called the police. She reported Rebecca missing. This was out of character. She wasn't in any of these places that she said she had been that day. There was no trace of her, and the phone just kept on ringing or voicemail. So yeah, police involved. Shortly after this, she managed to get hold of Joshua. So she had been ringing him as well, because obviously Rebecca was meant to be with Joshua. That was the plan. That's what she'd been told. So she'd been trying to call Joshua this whole time. Someone was ringing Joshua, someone was ringing Rebecca's phone, and they just kept on trying. Poor Jessica, Rebecca's younger sister, she was constantly ringing someone, trying to get through. So once she'd called the police, Sonia finally did get through to Joshua, and they had a little conversation on the phone. And Joshua said, I haven't actually seen Rebecca today. So what? It all got very confusing. Sonia said that she spoke to Joshua and she said, I'm going to be real. I have now called the police, involved the police, so you need to tell me, like, honestly, you're telling me you have not seen Rebecca today. And he was like, no. She was very convinced. Sonia said he sounded genuinely worried, and that this was all very confusing for him and he couldn't understand it. He said that he had spoken to Rebecca. They had meant to be meeting. Is that English? They had meant to meet, and he couldn't make it. And he corroborated the story that Sonia had been getting on the phone with Rebecca. He said, oh no, I had to change my plans to meet her because I ended up having to be at my nan's. So I rang and I said, I'm really sorry that I've messed you around. I can't meet you now. And that was the last he'd heard from her. Sonia then said to him on the phone, you're telling me that you were not standing in front of Rebecca in town today? And he said no. So who was? This made Sonia's blood run cold. When she had been on the phone with Rebecca and she said she was standing with Joshua, Sonia found it odd that Joshua hadn't said anything, and this would all make sense if it wasn't really Josh that was standing there, and for some reason Rebecca had lied, and now Sonia's thinking, who is my daughter with? What is going on? The worry must have just been tremendous. Sonia and Joshua agreed to stay in contact with each other. If they heard anything, they would speak to each other. Joshua wrote on Sonia's Facebook and on his Facebook about how worried he was and how he was so worried and sad for Sonia, Rebecca's mum. And yeah, so it all just seemed totally legit. But Joshua's a charming, crafty bugger, isn't he? Joshua didn't help himself in a way. He had written on Facebook at one point that he was chilling with friends, but he'd also told Sonia that he was at his nan's. So it was all a bit weird. And he, in fact, did spend the evening time at his nan's with his best friend. I don't think his best friend had a very good evening. The next day, the case was released to the press, and this is when his best friend completely broke down to his parents. He told his parents that he thought that Rebecca really was hurt. Something had gone wrong, terribly wrong, and they needed to call the police. He told the police that they needed to look in a certain area of this woodland, the same woodland that was on his profile picture, Joshua's profile picture. The police quickly got to it. They went to that area. Really sadly, the police found Rebecca's body in that area of the woodland. She was lying face down, and a post-mortem would later suggest that she had been hit over the back of the head many, many, many times with a rock until her skull had completely caved in. Just awful. Like, so much rage. My lights are dimming again. Excuse me. It's like with the mood of the case, almost. Oh, God, that's going to freak me out. The police were quick to arrest Joshua. His friend had basically said what had happened and that he was the one that had done it. So they arrested the boy and they also arrested Josh. When Sonia was told this information, obviously just utter heartbreak that her daughter was dead, but she also couldn't believe that it was Joshua. He was so nice, so polite. He was Rebecca's boyfriend, so she thought they'd got back together. And this was just, she couldn't comprehend it. And she is cross now that she was charmed by Joshua. The police interviewed school friends, and every single school friend that they spoke to, there was just not even a pause. It was like, is there anyone that you can think of that would have hurt Rebecca? And they were like, no, Joshua. He was just on the tip of everyone's tongue. Anyone that knew him and knew Rebecca, they just knew. Some kids even just watched it. When they watched it on the news, they were like, oh my God, he did it. Joshua was charged with Rebecca's murder, and the trial would begin on July 2011. And he did not seem all that arsed, to be fair. He did not seem to give one hoot. Pictures of him walking into court with like cheeky smile on his face. Come on, something not right at all with that. And just throughout the whole thing, like quite graphic. I mean, it was an awful, awful crime. He showed no remorse. He showed no emotion, really. He didn't care. It didn't look like he cared. It was almost like one of the substitute teachers was in it's not an audience. What is it when you're in court and you're watching it? One of them, she was there in court, and she said, she looked at him and she just couldn't believe, she couldn't believe that someone she knew, like a student, could do this to another person, let alone another student girlfriend, sort of. Anyway, she couldn't believe it. And she said when she looked at him, it was just like there was nothing there, nothing behind the eyes. That was so dramatic. Nothing behind the eyes. And that's freaky, isn't it? That's scary. As part of the investigation, Joshua's home was obviously searched, his phone, laptop, all things like that. And they found deadly nightshade and foxglove made into poison with like Coke, like all, Coca-Cola, I think, mixed up, like these little, like poison. I think he really did try and give it a go, when she was in hospital. I really think he did. Did I say deadly nightshade? That's what I meant. Deadly nightshade and foxglove, or foxglove. One of them nasty things. That's all circumstantial anyway, isn't it? Like he's a weirdo with guns and knives and weird demonic drawings and poison, but doesn't paint a good picture, does it, for Josh? His phone was searched, and honestly, on the day that he had murdered Rebecca, he sent a text to a friend, and I shall read it. Part of it. Don't say anything, but you might just owe me breakfast. And again, he received a message later on that day, after he had murdered Rebecca. A friend said, are you still with Rebecca? And he said, in reply, define with. Piece of shit. just no remorse. It was like he was making, it was like a joke. It's like he was making light of it. And that just really gets to me. Just, In the trial, Joshua's a piece of shit, and he just was like, the trial was a farce. He just said, it wasn't me, it was my friend. He blamed it on his friend. Apparently this is just nonsense, by the way. He and Rebecca were in the woods and they called this friend and they were going to play a prank on him, and the friend didn't like it, so he picked up a rock and he hit Rebecca on the head and he killed her. I mean, why didn't you stop him then, Joshua? You just watch somebody be bludgeoned to death with a rock? No. Lies. Stupid waste of time. The judge asked Joshua to show them, reenact what happened, what his friend had done, and he reenacted it in court. And Sonia said it was just awful, because you could tell when he was reenacting what happened that it was him that had done it. That just must have been so hard to watch. Friends of Joshua's came forward and they testified against Joshua because they had all been subject to this knowledge, and they testified that he'd been talking about this for months, that he'd planned her murder. They all thought that this was just hot air and it wasn't going to come to fruition. And sadly for these young teenagers, they got a real dose of guilt, because they all just thought, looking back, what could they have done differently? Could they have stopped this? Should they have spoken up? Should they have said something? But that's a lot of guilt for young shoulders, isn't it? And they did think he was just yakking on about it. Josh even took a friend to see her body, Rebecca's body, after he'd done what he'd done. And that poor child has got to live with that as well for the rest of their life too. He told this friend that he'd actually tried to break Rebecca's neck, but that it is harder than you think. So she was screaming, and then he just picked up a very big rock, and it was a big rock. You couldn't really lift it with one hand, it was quite big. He picked up this rock, and that's when he started to hit her over the head. He said that he could feel and see when her skull caved in. That's delightful. I do have many questions, but I really think the simplest answer to this is that he was very sick, very troubled. Why? It is my biggest question. Some said that he talked about it so much that he talked himself into it. If that's true, why am I not 10 stone? Right? More than that, I believe he is narcissistic, he was obsessed, and that he had a psychological disorder. There was something wrong with him. He's a very dangerous person. On a documentary that I watched, the forensic psychologist said that she believed he had antisocial personality disorder. Yeah. And deep-seated psychological issues. I do have to use my notes sometimes, it's tricky, lots of words, especially this week. It's honestly so draining. On the 27th of July in 2011, Joshua Davies was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 14 years. Sonia, Rebecca's mum, has campaigned for life to mean life and for him to remain in prison forever. However, he has recently-ish confessed to the murder. So he never did before, and 8 years later, 8 years after he was sentenced, he confessed. There's only one reason that he would do this, and this is to help his case for parole. Because I don't think you get parole if you maintain that you are innocent, I believe. But yeah, so he's confessed now to what happened. I mean, this guy is a serial killer all over, isn't he? They can't let him out. 16 years old he was when he did this to Rebecca. Like a planned, calculated murder. And like luring her into the woods. It's just like, that's callous and premeditated. The way and the method that he murdered her as well is just, I mean, no, you can't, he can't, no. because he's confessed, Rebecca's poor family have had to write up witness statements to say what the effect of his crime has had on them, so that they are ready for his parole, because they don't want that guy out. No way. She's going to fight tooth and nail. It was hard watching Sonia in the documentary that I watched. She really wanted, and this is why I thought it was good to cover this case, she wanted her story out there. She wanted people to know what happened to Rebecca. She wanted people to see where Rebecca had died and how, and hear all of these things. So she wanted that because she wants that guy behind bars, and that's her aim, that's her goal. So this poor woman did the walk that her daughter did before she died. She walked from the train station to the park, to the town, into the woods, and then stood where her daughter died to raise awareness for this case. And it's genuinely chilling to just think about what he did. Like, just think about that for a second. Just what the fuck? Yeah, she really wants him there for life. And I agree. Something that really hit me as well when I was researching this was the contrast. Rebecca was so happy and excited and loved up and couldn't believe her luck that he was going to get back together with her. Dancing in her room, buying a new outfit, putting makeup on, telling her mum, talking to her friends. And on the other side, he was plotting her murder in numerous ways and telling his friends and bragging about it and talking about getting a free frickin' breakfast. It's just awful. Really tragic one, this one, guys. I really, really hope that he doesn't get an early release. We'll have to just keep watching and see what happens with that one. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a mug. A cool mug. A superhero mug of gin. I'm so glad that I came up and filmed today. It has definitely made me feel better. So thank you so much. I was so on the edge. I was like, should I? Shouldn't I? Did genuinely want to sit on the sofa and eat chocolate and be in my pyjamas all day. But this definitely helped. It's always a pleasure to come and talk to you. Oh my god, itchy eyebrows. Anyway, I'm now going to go and get myself chocolate. Oh my god, chocolate. And a blanket. It's not cold, but you know when you just want to snug up? That's me today. And I'm going to watch Midsummer Murders. Shut the front door. God, that sounds amazing. That's making me feel so happy. Anyway, I must go because it's calling me. Can't believe I've done this whole video and I haven't done the theme tune for Batman. But all I can think of is ding 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 ding. What's that? Is that James Bond? Come on. What's Batman? What's the Batman song? Batman. Batman. See you next week. Bye. Love you.